This is Pastor Michael Nelson once again from the House of Peace, and I just want to welcome you to the Food for Thought. Well, hallelujah, you know what I always say, please get your pen, your paper, your iPad, your tablet, or whatever so that you can take notes. Also use your phone to screenshot, because we have a ton of scripture and a ton of notes. And boy, also not only do that, but please share this with somebody. Please, because somebody's going to get blessed. Just like you're going to get blessed, you want somebody else to be blessed. Somebody's life is going to be changed. Somebody's life is going to be transformed. Hallelujah. So we're going to get ready to get started. Okay, today I'm going to be moving on to part 11 in my series of teaching of what does it mean to rest in the Lord. One more time. What does it mean to rest in the Lord? Now, in part 10, we talked about what is spiritual rest and some triggers that can cause us not to walk in God's spiritual rest. Now, if you didn't get a chance to see lesson 10, please go back on our Facebook or YouTube page to view it. Now, today, I want to talk about what has to happen in our lives before we come to the point of having our eyes open to realize the importance of spiritual rest. Can I say it again? What has to happen in our lives before we come to the point of having our eyes open to realize the importance of spiritual rest? You see, God is very concerned about our overall well-being. Okay, would you say that with me? God is concerned about me. One more time. God is concerned about me. All right? So I'm going to say it again. God is very, very concerned about our overall well-being, and ultimately each of us learning how to rest in the Lord. Okay? You see, honoring God with our body certainly includes our physical health, but we're missing the point if we neglect our spiritual health as well. In fact, the Apostle Paul tells us that training for godliness, okay, or spiritual health is even more important than physical training. Look what it says here in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 8, reading from the NLT. It says, physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. Wow. You see, rest, okay, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, helps us to create a balance between self-care and walking in the footsteps of the Master. In other words, true rest only comes when we place our lives entirely in the hands of Jesus Christ in faith. Okay? Would you type that, Lord, help me to place my hands in your hands? Okay? Or no, let's say it like this. Lord, help me to place my life in your hands. Okay? Lord, help me to place my life in your hands. You see, then and only then will we have complete spiritual rest. You see, spiritual rest offers peace and contentment in the thick of storms and life pressures, because we remember where our hope and our help cometh from. I like what the psalmist said here in Psalms chapter 121, verses 1 through 2. He said, I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. Verse 2, my help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. That is so powerful. You see, like so many of God's gracious gifts, this one doesn't depend on our enoughness. I believe spiritual rest is incredibly instinctive to us as we walk with God, but we tend to forget how to follow through when we get overly busy. That's right, we can get overly busy. Okay? You see, in busy seasons, we forget to pause and assess what responsibility really belongs to on our shoulder and what weight is meant for God to bear on our behalf. Look what it says here in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. It says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Hallelujah. "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." You see, spiritual rest doesn't come when our problems are all solved and every to-do item is checked off the list. That's good because those achievements will never take place earthside. You hear what I said? It will never take place earthside. Instead, spiritual rest comes in the midst of our anxiety and worry and fear. You see, we remember our mighty warriors who saves. You see, despite all we face, we can find spiritual rest when we stop spinning in our own strength and invite God to refresh us with spiritual rest and renewal. Do you know what God has to allow to happen in our lives in order to get us to our spiritual rest? Do you really want to know? All right, would you type, "Pastor, I want to know"? And if you don't, don't type, "Pastor, I don't want to know." You want to know. All right. Now, to show you what I'm talking about, I read a story by Ted Hunell. He tells the story of a strong young athlete who was waddling waist deep in the shallow part of a recreational lake. Unknowingly, he stepped off an underwater ledge and he plunged 15 feet beneath the surface of the water. After several seconds, he bobbed to the top of the water, flailing his arms and grasping for breath. The lifeguard attentively watched the situations from a nearby bank. A friend of a struggling young athlete, he grabbed the lifeguard by the arm and he cried out, "Bob, can't swim. You've got to help him. Please help him." The lifeguard, he remained unmoved as Bob continued kicking and splashing wildly. The young man's friend furiously yelled at the lifeguard, "If you don't go after him, I will." Calmly but firmly, the lifeguard said, "No one can help him yet." No one can help him yet. He said, "I'll help him when he's ready for my help." Wow. What did he mean by that? "I'll help him when he's ready for my help." Okay. So after a couple of minutes, the young man's the young athlete stopped his struggle as his body became limp. The patient lifeguard suddenly dove into the water, swam out to the young man, and brought him to the shore for a successful rescue. Later, the friend asked the lifeguard, "Why did you wait so long to help my friend?" The young lifeguard responded, "As long as Bob was trying to save himself, there was nothing I could do to help him." Wow. Can I say it again? As long as Bob was trying to save himself, there was nothing I could do or nothing I could have done for him. You see, if I had swam out to him, he would have grabbed me and pulled me under with him. But only when he was weak, come on, exhausted, and had given up was I able to save him. You see, the story of struggle and exhaustion before deliverance is not only a lesson for lifeguards, but it's a powerful, yes, a powerful revelation of what often occurs in our spiritual journey. Are you with me? So let me say this. If you're going to learn how to rest spiritually, these are some things I need to say to you. We have to come to the end of ourselves and let God teach us how to find spiritual rest. Can I say it again? We have to come to the end of ourselves and let God teach us how to find spiritual rest. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about, okay? David had been on the run from King Saul, who was about to kill him, okay? Now, at this point in David's life, he was a fugitive on the run from Saul. Now, many years during which he was public enemy number one in all of Israel. That's because it had been said and it had been prophesied that David would one day become king of Israel. And when he fought Goliath, the people chanted, Saul has slain his thousands, but David had slain his tens of thousands. And you know what? At that point, Saul became jealous because he knew that one day David would become king. And so, like I said, he tried to kill him. Now, at one point in David's life, he was a fugitive on the run from Saul. Many years during which he was public enemy number one in all of Israel. You see, God used this time of forced exile to develop David to learn how not to depend on himself, but to rest in the Lord by depending on God. Are y'all with me? You see, this part of this lesson is going to take me maybe 2 weeks or so to help you to understand what I mean by this. So let's go back to the story of David. Now, the story of David is not set before us as a moral model to copy, but that's because he's not someone who had arrived spiritually, okay? David was still spiritually immature, okay? And God was trying to develop him, okay? Because he didn't have it all together, okay? Or he wasn't perfect, okay? At this point, he wasn't he was an example at times, and then at other times he wasn't. So he was not a perfect example to follow at this point, okay? And you say, what do you mean? I'll show you. You see, David is a person who does things badly at times. That's right. He does things badly at times because he's immature and God is trying to develop him. And oftentimes, you know what? He does things worse. That's right. Worse, okay? All right? Than we do. But in the process, guess what? He doesn't give up. All right? He doesn't withdraw from God in spite of what God is trying to do in his life. You see, in the period of the life of David, it begins a life on the run, as I said, from King Saul, who knows that he knows that King Saul's intent is to murder him. Now, at the beginning of Saul had these black moods that passed, but now there was a price on David's head, okay? And his life is in danger, and he runs, okay? What do you do when your life is in danger? You run, all right? You know what? His life was so far in danger, he didn't have time to pack. He didn't have time to plan. He just simply runs. That's right. He simply runs. Now, on 3 occasions during his time, he tells or lives lies. Now, I'm not talking about Saul. I'm talking about David. When he was on the run, he started to tell lies to protect himself. All right? And on 6 occasions, Saul tries to kill David himself or have David killed, okay? And I know I keep emphasizing this, but I'm going to bring out some points to help you to understand what I mean. You see, he is unsafe at the place with the king's son, okay, who they were best of friends. The Bible tells us that Jonathan loved David as he loved him, like he loved himself. That's some powerful, friendship and some powerful love. But he's unsafe at the palace with the king's son. He's unsafe at home with the king's daughter, Micah, who is his wife. He even is unsafe, Prophet Samuel. Wow. You see, in spite of his friend Jonathan's assurance, David feared for his life. Out of that fear sprang his first lie, okay? Back in chapter 20, okay? This is 1 Samuel chapter 20. And in order to discover his standing at the palace, David pushes his friend Jonathan into a compromising position, okay? In other words, he fabricates a story about his absence from the new moon festival. Okay, look what it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 5 through 7. It says, so David said, look, tomorrow is the new moon festival, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his own hometown, because of an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. Now, you know he's getting his friend to lie for him. Hello? You ever had some friends that they wanted you to tell a lie for them? Well, this is what David is trying to tell the king's son, who they were like this. Okay, they were like this. Verse 7, if he says, very well, then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. Guess what? Because Jonathan loved David like he loved himself. Guess what? Jonathan goes along with this lie, but it drove a deep wedge between him and his father. Okay, because when he said that, his father even tried to kill his own son because he said, are you protecting this man from me? Okay, are y'all understanding? You see, it was a risky thing to do it, and it stretched the bonds of their friendship between David and Jonathan. Now, what drove David to lie? Fear. Okay, fear. He had fear. Look what it says here in 1 Samuel 20, verse 3. But David said, and I'm not reading the whole thing, but David said, there's only a step between me and death. In other words, he's going to catch up to me and he's going to kill me one day. But you remember, David had to remember that God had given him a promise that one day he was going to be king. But here he is doing some things. He's lying. Okay, he got his best friend in trouble to lie for him. And here it is. He knew why he did this, why he told this lie, because he was living in fear. He was living in fear. Question, what is fear doing to you? Okay, you see, maybe this is where David is at. Instead of looking up at God, he looks at the situation, and in his heart, he's filled with fear, and he lies through Jonathan to Saul. And then guess what it do? This what it does. It causes him to run for his life. Okay, are y'all understanding? What caused David to panic? That's the question. What caused David to panic? You see, had his close friend with God grown cold as he had moved up in the world, had he begun to rely more on his reputation as a warrior than on God? Okay, all right? So think about that. Think about that, all right? You remember, there's some things that I need to say to help you to understand when he was much younger, that he didn't live in fear when he faced somebody that was much more dangerous than Saul. You see, it's easy to try and rely on our own resources. Come on. You see, or our past experiences. You see, after a few days probably on the run, David comes to Nob, where there is a colony of priests and their families. Their task is to care for the tabernacle. Now, Ahimelech is the senior priest there, and David is hungry and defenseless, and he wants food and weaponry. Okay, Ahimelech is suspicious. Why is David alone? Where are his men? Something is wrong with this picture. You see, he must have known, as all Israel had known, that Saul was out to get David, that Saul was out to kill David. You see, as Ahimelech questioned David, fear grips his heart, and truth is a casualty. Once again, what's causing him? Fear. Okay, look what it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 2 through 3. It said, David answered Ahimelech the priest, the king charged me with a certain matter and said to me, no one is to know anything about your mission and your instructions. Whoa, okay. He gets his friend Jonathan to lie to Saul, who is Jonathan's father. Now he's lying to the man of God. He's lying to the priest. You see, as for my men, he says, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. That's not true. Verse 3, now then, what have you to hand? Okay, give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find. Okay, what is David doing again? He's lying. Okay, he's not trusting God. He's lying. Okay, you see, there are no men there in there are no men and there is no secret mission. The only bread available is the stale old shewbread. This is the bread placed before the Lord in the tabernacle as a reminder to the people of God's provision. So fresh bread was placed there every week, and this bread David asked for is the old bread. You see, this was allowed to be eaten by the priest alone. Strictly speaking, it was illegal for David or his fictitious men to eat this bread. However, Ahimelech asked about the ceremony purity of David's men. He said, if they're going to eat the holy bread, he asked them, okay, is your men's pure? Have they abstained from sexual relationship? And David lies again, and he swears blind that they are ritually pure, and he gets the bread. Okay? He gets the bread. Now, guess what? He's going to do something else. Now, remember, he's on a mission, but he ain't got no weapons. So he asked him, is there a weapon there? Because he needed a weapon. 1 Samuel chapter 21, verses 8 through 9. David asked Ahimelech, don't you have a spear or a sword here? I haven't bought my sword or any other weapon because the king's business was urgent. Wow. One lie after another. Lying to the man of God. Verse 9. The priest replied, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elam, is here. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There's no sword here but that one. David said, there is none like it. Give it to me. He was happy. Okay. You see, why is David telling all these lies? He's tired. He's frustrated. He's weary. He can't understand. Okay, why am I having to go all through this? God, you said I'm going to be king one day, and Lord, I'm not going to fight against Saul, but he's going through this, but he's tired. Y'all hear me? He's tired. And sometimes when you're spiritually tired will cause you to do and say things or do things that you shouldn't do. You see, David is in a panic mode. It is strange that he wants Goliath's sword. It hadn't done Goliath any good, so why did he want it? If it hadn't done Goliath any, he killed Goliath, okay, with that sword. Now, watch this. David himself was, you remember when he fought Goliath? You remember when he was just spiritually in tune with God as a child, okay? You remember what he said when he fought Goliath? He said this in 1 Samuel 17:45. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with the sword and the spear and the javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. But you see, he wanted the sword. Okay, he trusted God with a sling and 5 smooth stones to defeat the enemy, but now he's tired and he's on the run and he's living in fear. He can't think straight, and it's causing him not to depend on God, and it's causing him to tell lies. Are y'all with me? Are you with me? Now he's in distress and he's panicking. And in effect, he's saying to King Saul, I'm not coming to you in the name of the Lord. I'm coming to you with a sword. You know what I'm saying? All right. He's saying, hey, if you catch up to me, I got this sword. But you know, one thing David did do, every time he had a chance to kill Saul, he would not do it because he said, I would not touch God's anointed. But yet he said, look, I'm not going to let him kill me. Okay. Now I know we all feel this way, but you got to remember David's whole approach to everything is causing him to live lies, you know, to lie to people. And we're going to see what his lies does for him. Okay. Now, there was a time in your life when, like David, you trusted God implicitly, okay, in the name of the Lord. But now you're on a long drift from God, and you're trusting in your equivalence of Goliath's sword. In other words, you know, when you get tired and it just don't seem like things is working and you've been praying and you've been doing a lot of stuff, we start taking matters into our own hands. Are y'all with me? And we start thinking, well, God, you're taking too long, so I'm going to have to do this, okay? And this is what David is doing. You see, in desperation, David goes to Gath, G-A-T-H, a Philistine town, and he's recklessly fleeing into the enemy's city. He seeks refuge with King Achish, which is an enemy of Israel. Wow. Now, watch this. Look what David does. David is going through all of these antics because guess what? He's emotionally tired. He's physically exhausted. He's mentally tired, but he's spiritually out of tune. Okay, he's just not being able to just trust God and believe God that, Lord, I got peace that you're not going to allow anything to happen to me. But he's trying to help God along the way. Now look what happens. Okay, he recognizes his life is in danger. Okay, and he lies again. Okay, wait a minute, he lies. What do you mean? In other words, when he goes to this king to seek refuge, guess what? He's pretending, okay? What is he pretending? Okay? He acts like he's lost his insanity. He's acting like a wild man. He's acting like he's a crazy man. Look what it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 13. It says, so he pretended to be insane in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. Wow. Wow. At this point in David's life, he's just messed up. Are y'all hearing me? But he's on the run. He's fearful. He's tired. Are y'all hearing me? Okay? So here is David, no longer the shepherd and warrior relying on God, but fearful and fleeing for his life. Okay? Fabricating lies, okay, and pretending like he's mad. Madness. I'm talking about acting crazy. All right? You see, he's no longer trusting God to save him. His only thought is saving his own skin. He forgot. It's almost like he forgot all the promises of God. That God says, hey, I got this. I'm going to take care of you. You're going to be king in place of King Saul. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have to use wisdom, but, in doing stuff, but we shouldn't have to go outside of doing things on our own or telling lies to get by and doing things that are not right. You see, at Nob, when David lied to Ahimelech, one of Saul's servants was listening, and he was an opportunist. And at the right moment, he told Saul what transpired that day as a result of Saul ordered the priest and their families and all their possessions to be destroyed. And Doeg was the man who did that dreadful deed. Wow, you hear what? Because David lied to the priest and said he was on a mission from Saul. When Saul came to confront the priest and he said, did you help David? He said, sure I did. I gave him bread and I gave him the sword of Saul. See, the priest didn't know that David was telling a lie. And guess what? Saul got mad and he had the priest killed. Let me show you. 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 18 through 19. The king then ordered Doeg, you turn and strike down the priest. Yeah, yes, that's right. The men of God, the men of the cloth. King Saul is having Doeg kill the priests. So Doeg, the Edomite, turned and struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. Verse 19, he also put to sword the sword Nob, the town of the priests, with its men and women, its children and its infants, and its cattle and donkeys and sheep. You see, David's sin led to tragedy. David's lies led to tragedy. It cost the priests, the people, the city, the animal. Everybody lost their lives because David started doing things or taking matters into his own hands. See, the massacre of 85 priests and their family was a hard lesson for David to learn. It was a hard lesson. But you know what? It was the turning point in David's life where he says, you know what? I got to stop doing this. I'm tired. I am so tired that it's not causing me to acknowledge God. It's not causing me to ask God what I should do. Look at the remorse for his lying. This is the turning point in his life, okay? This is the turning point. And guess what? God has a turning point in your life where you're just running, trying to make it happen, trying to do things on your own. You're burnt out, you're tired, you're not praying like you should, you're not reading like you should. You're trying to make things happen. Come on, that's not resting in the Lord. Are y'all with me? Okay? Not everybody was killed that fatally day of the massacre. That's because of one of Ahimelech's sons, Abiathar, escaped and came to David. Look what it says here in 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 20 through 22. But Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, son of Abitub, escaped and fled to join David. Verse 21, he told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, that day when Doeg, the Edomite, was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul. And then look, he said, I am responsible for the death of your father's whole family. He said, I am the one who's done this. I've done this because I haven't depended on God. I haven't acknowledged God. I haven't done what I needed to do. You see, when David hears what happened, he realized he is indirectly responsible for this tragedy. Immediately, without hesitation, without qualification, he admits his guilt, okay? He admits, I've been doing this wrong. This is not the way that God wants me to do this. I need to go back to that faith like I had when I was a shepherd boy. Wow. See, the way he tells it, that day he lied to Ahimelech. He knew Doeg was there, and he knew how unscrupulous that man was. Even then, there was a struggle in his conscience. He was panic-stricken. That's right, he was panic-stricken. You see, but the thing was, as I close, from that day on, David learned how to rest in the Lord. He learned how to rest in the Lord. It took a tragedy to happen, but from that day, he learned how to rest in the Lord and depend upon God for guidance, okay? No matter how things were looking, he learned that day. Now, we will talk about that next week of how he learned how to rest in the Lord, okay? So I got to stop there. I hope that you learned something from that. I hope that you understand that when you do not rest in God's rest, it can create more problems in your life. It can create more problems in other people's lives because you're not in a place where you're depending on God, where you're leaning towards your own understanding. And God don't want us to lean on our understanding. He knows your name. He knows everything about you, and he wants to help you even when you cannot see it, to trust in him. Because when you trust in him, guess what? You ain't gonna be stressing. Okay, when you trust in him, okay, you're not going to be frustrated and worried and doing all of this type of stuff. Yes, things are real, but you know what? We have to be like our old spiritual fathers when they sung that song, I got a feeling everything is going to be all right. We got to have the peace of God. We got to learn how to rest in God, knowing that he has his hand upon us. Well, I need to stop there. Please share this with somebody. And please share with somebody. Please share with somebody. And you know what I'm going to say. Have a Jesus-filled day. Look forward to breaking this down, the rest of this next week. God bless.